turn the computer off, my computer off, would that then stop the sound and I would be able to turn it back on for the music? Wouldn't that be brilliant?
Yes.
Please be seated. I don't know, did I even pray over this sermon? I desperately need to. What a morning. We will, in the prayers of the people, whoever is saying those, is that Steve?
Yes.
Okay, I had Carol, because Carol called me this morning to say that she had a contact stuck in her eye that she couldn't get out since Friday night. And she was on her way to an eye doctor that she found just like wouldn't see her. So we will add her to the prayers. And quite frankly, with that, then I'm immediately trying to get music on the Zoom. I don't know. And I got donuts in the car for the blessing of the animals. It's raining, but we're still blessing animals. We're bringing them inside. If you have a dog that pees and poops inside, bring him. You have him in a crate where he can pee and poop in the crate. But my experience is that most people's dogs don't do that inside, so we don't have to worry. Cats will already be in crates, so that will be fine. We had a fantastic bake sale yesterday. I heard great things. And the library even made us little posters for the blessing of animals today. And this is our first, well, my first ecumenical foray into things, because I figured we had a better chance of getting people if we included other people. So we have a couple of different ministers from different churches coming. Hopefully they will bring some of their people, and we will have a great time. Cider and donuts, although I don't remember, am I buying the cider?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to buy cider. I have the donuts already. I'm going to buy cider. Okay, so this looks like this is just a rambling sermon, but it actually is going to lead someplace. This is, I'm trusting God that this is going to happen. Because our comic says, God, you are always more ready to hear than we to pray, and to give more than we either desire or deserve. God is the one who is always first in line on our behalf. God is the one who, in spite of rain, in spite of computer glitches, in spite of contacts in eyes, still calls us to gather together, both virtually and in person, to worship that God, to renew our centeredness in God. Today's gospel reading is a difficult one because we know that in the United States of America, the majority of marriages do not make it through. And one of the differences between the Episcopal Church and the Roman Catholic Church is we both have the same stand. Marriage is meant to be a lifelong commitment. That is God's intention. That is God's desire. That is what God wants. So what the Roman Catholic Church, because they tend to be more legalistic than us, says when there's a marriage that fails, it must not have really been a marriage. And so I had the pleasure, while I was at the first church I was at, of signing the papers because a parishioner of mine had been the best man for this man's wedding 40-some years before. And the guy was getting divorced. So he had to send out these papers saying, you know, I saw evidence that, you know, this wasn't really a real marriage. And then that affidavit had to be signed by your priest. And so this guy came to me because I was his priest to sign that, yep, he, of course, had said, I had no idea this marriage wasn't going to work. I had no notion. And so I, the female priest, signed, you know, the Reverend Christine Humphrey, and it went merrily off to wherever their legalese goes. And I'm sure they paid a lot of money, and they probably got a divorce. In the Episcopal Church, we say, wait, God's intention is for this to be a lifelong commitment that flourishes and maintains and fills each person so they become more completely who God intends them to be. But we human beings are flawed. And sometimes that flaw causes even the love and commitment which we have made to fail and to falter. And so, in the Episcopal Church, if you want to be remarried, you need to come to the priest and meet with the priest. And the priest's discussion is, how do you understand that this first marriage of yours failed? What are the things that led up to that failure? What were the signs that things were going astray? And then, what was your part in contributing to that? Because in order for something to fail, it can never be 100% the other person's fault. And we're not going to grow unless and until we can see our part in it. And then, what are you going to do in this new relationship so that the same thing doesn't happen again? And then we will allow a person to be married. In other words, in the Episcopal Church, we look at what went wrong. Why wasn't God's intention fulfilled in this relationship? And what has been learned from that failure so that it doesn't repeat again and again. For we know that in many situations, there are multiple divorces because people keep marrying the same kind of person that wasn't able to be worked with the first time. And so our intention is, what have you learned? How have you grown so that you won't repeat this? Friday, I had the interesting experience of spending all day at a seminar, very well professionally done, on the concerns of the city of Pontiac. And it happened to be put on by Kirk of the Hills, which is a very rich Bloomfield Hills Presbyterian church. And they spent a lot of money. It was at the Strand Theater in downtown Pontiac, which is a gorgeous theater to see and to experience. And there were parts of it that were very, very good. But as the day progressed, I began feeling less and less comfortable. And I tried to figure out what were the elements that were bothering me so. And on reflection, you know, the city of Pontiac is at least 60% Black and probably 80% non-white. Every person involved in this program was white. They meant well. They desired to do good. But they didn't reach out to the majority of the population and involve them. They were going to come in and do good for us. I live in Pontiac, so I can say for us. And indeed, there were several small groups, and you were supposed to develop some sort of plan to take care of things. And so the small group I went to only because one of my colleagues was going to it, so I said, I'll go to that one, was on blight in the city, which is a problem in every city. But what I realized was I was the only resident there. There were 15 people involved, and everybody else was from Bloomfield Hills, Birmingham, I don't know where, but they weren't Pontiac. My friend had lived in Pontiac up until about 15 years ago, so at least she had some firsthand, although somewhat old, experience. But I thought, okay, what's wrong with this picture? We now have an all-white group of non-residents making up a plan for blight control for the city of Pontiac. Again, they meant well. I'm sure they meant well. Although I have to say, at least 3 or 4 of them were involved in careers where they made money by buying houses and fixing them up and flipping them. And so I have to say I was taking kind of a giant step back about how much of this is that you care about this place and the people of this place, and how much of it is you see a way to make a quick buck. Again, all well-meaning people, just as well-intentioned as people in failed marriages started out that marriages. But they failed to see and to understand that you have to include people. You have to not do things for the other person, but help people do things for themselves. And I think that's some of what today's gospel reading is really teaching us. That we need to put our heads up and notice, even if we have the best of intentions. Our Sacred Ground program is the purpose of the bottom line purpose of this is just to make us more aware of different people and more aware of where they are coming from. And it was very interesting because last week we sort of went through our own genealogy, and this is just so fascinating because Narcy Scott was the person whose genealogy goes back the farthest in the United States of America. And she is Hispanic. But her ancestor back in the early 1700s received a land grant from the King of Spain in America. In most conversation today, you will have to look very, 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 very hard to get anyone to realize that the Hispanic person they might be talking about might have been here in America, their ancestors, longer than they. And we will see that in several instances in the various films that we are going to experience and see. So if you haven't signed up and would like to, it's never too late. Just let Angie know, Angela know. Why did I call her Angie? To my knowledge, she's never been called that. Angela call the church, leave a message for her, and she will add you to the list. And so then at the end of the gospel, Jesus is bringing children to him and says, unless you enter the kingdom of God like one of these, unless you accept them. Well, what do we know about children? They are not perfect. Even though Eloise is delightful, and I loved her help reading today, I'm sure that Steve and Heather would not claim that she is perfect without fault 100% of the time. And I see Jeff is nodding in terms of his hands. So it's not that children are somehow the example of perfect humanity, but children do have an openness and an acceptance. And they do have eyes that see things new. And I think that's what God, through Jesus, is telling us. We need to, in a city that is 80% non-white, we need to notice when there is a program to help the city that is totally run by whites. That there's something not quite right about that. We need to notice when someone starts talking about immigrants and how no good they are, and they're speaking about Hispanics, that maybe that person actually, the ancestors have been here longer than our own. Need to have the eyes open so that we can see and experience as God sees and experiences. Almighty and everlasting God, you are always more ready to hear than we to pray, and to give more than we either desire or deserve. God is the one who is ready. God is the one who acts. Our job is to listen, to look, to notice, and to broaden our understanding so that we may pick up those nuances that others do not even see. And so, during this week, I would suggest that you look when you begin to judge someone and think, what do I really know? There's a Facebook post about, nobody knows the problems that another person is going through. And so often, just not judging you will give them the opening to be able to heal and to reach out. One of the fantastic things about this seminar, and I don't know why they did it other than it's a name attractor, is Becca Stevens, who is in charge of Thistle Farms. She is an Episcopal priest who is called to work with women who have experienced abuse and rape, who have been in the streets, who have been involved in human trafficking, and to help them change and reform their lives. And she said the first thing is you have to recognize and accept and love the person for who they are right when they come in. That it is only as they experience acceptance and love that they can even begin to look up and look beyond. And she pointed out that they had built a house to house some of these women, and the house cost like $1 million. And that she said there was a lot of condemnation about, why were you spending, you could have bought a cheap house. And she said, these people have never had anything lavished on them. And she then pointed out that it was, the $1 million was cheaper than having incarcerated these women by far. And that actually, what seemed like a lot of money was actually a reduction in the overall cost to society of leaving them where they were. And so let us this week pray that we can see with the eyes and openness and hear with the newness of sound like those children, and then reach out and do as Jesus did and embrace the other. Let us stand and reaffirm our faith in the words of the Nicene Creed, found on page 358.